Let me be direct with you. The average person thinks they're being smart by keeping cash in the bank. They're not. They're being systematically robbed, and they're thanking the thief for the service. I'm going to show you exactly how this works, and more importantly, what the wealthy do differently. If you're keeping significant amounts of money in a bank account earning 0.5% while inflation runs at 3 or 4%, you're not being cautious. You're being financially illiterate. And the cost of that illiteracy compounds every single day you wait to fix it. Let me start with the mathematics, because mathematics doesn't care about your feelings. If you have $100,000 sitting in a savings account earning 0.5%, and inflation is running at 3%, you're losing 2.5% of purchasing power annually. That's $2,500 of real wealth evaporating every year. Over a decade, you've lost $25,000 in purchasing power. Not on paper. In reality, that money can buy 25% less than it could 10 years ago. Now, I can already hear the objections. But Charlie, cash is safe. I can see my balance. It doesn't go down. The number stays the same. That's exactly the problem. You're watching the wrong number. You're mesmerized by nominal dollars while ignoring what those dollars can actually purchase. It's like being proud that your car still has 4 wheels while ignoring that the engine is slowly dying. The wealthy don't make this mistake, not because they're smarter, though some are, but because they understand a fundamental principle that escapes most people. The purpose of money isn't to sit still. The purpose of money is to preserve and grow purchasing power over time. Cash fails at both. Let me give you the framework I've used for 8 decades. There are 5 categories of assets that are genuinely safer than cash when safety is properly defined. Not safer in terms of nominal stability, that's the trap. Safer in terms of what actually matters, maintaining and growing your real purchasing power over decades. Before I explain each one, I need to address the psychology, because understanding these assets intellectually and actually using them are 2 different things. Most people suffer from what I call comfort bias. They mistake familiarity for safety. Cash feels safe because you've always had cash. Your parents kept cash. Everyone keeps cash. It's normal. But normal and smart are not synonyms. In Weimar Germany, keeping cash was normal right up until it became catastrophic. The first asset category is equity ownership in productive businesses. Most people call this stocks, but that language obscures what you're actually buying. When you buy stock, you're buying a piece of a real business. You own a fraction of its factories, its brand, its customer relationships, its ability to generate earnings. Here's why this matters for inflation. A well-run business with pricing power doesn't just sit there like cash. When inflation hits, it adapts. Costs rise, so it raises prices. Wages increase, so it increases productivity. A dollar loses value, but the business keeps producing goods and services that people need. The value adjusts naturally. Think about Coca-Cola, which Berkshire owns a substantial position in. When we bought that stake decades ago, a Coke cost a nickel. Today it costs $2. The business didn't just sit there accepting lower real returns. It raised prices. Its earnings grew. The value of our ownership grew with it. That's the fundamental difference between owning a business and owning cash. Cash is inert. Businesses adapt. Cash decays. Businesses compound. Now, I'm not suggesting you buy random stocks because some charlatan on the internet said they're going up. Most stocks are overpriced most of the time. Most investors are their own worst enemies. They buy high when everyone's excited and sell low when everyone's panicking. That's not investing. That's expensive entertainment. Here's the principle you need to understand. Buy ownership in businesses you actually understand. Businesses with durable competitive advantages. Businesses that will still be relevant in 20 years. Businesses run by competent, honest people. Buy them at sensible prices. Then do the hardest thing. Wait. Don't check the price every day. Don't panic when the market drops. Don't sell because you're bored or scared or greedy. Just hold ownership in productive enterprises and let them do what they do, which is generate earnings and grow value over time. Warren and I didn't build Berkshire by trading actively. We built it by buying great businesses and holding them, sometimes for decades. That's not because we're patient saints. It's because we understand that business value compounds while trading activity compounds costs and mistakes. The mathematical advantage of owning businesses versus cash is overwhelming. Over the past century, stocks returned about 10% annually. Cash returned essentially zero after inflation. That 10% difference compounded over 30 years turns 100,000 into 1.7 million. Cash turns it into 100,000 that buys half what it used to. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between comfort and poverty and retirement. But here's the critical qualifier. This only works if you stay within your circle of competence. If you don't understand businesses, if you can't read a balance sheet, if you panic during downturns, then you'll destroy yourself. You'll buy at peaks, sell at bottoms, and conclude that stocks don't work. The problem won't be stocks. The problem will be you. So know what you know. More importantly, know what you don't know. If individual stock selection is outside your competence, buy a low-cost index fund tracking the S&P 500. You'll own pieces of America's 500 largest companies. You'll get their collective growth, their collective adaptation to inflation, their collective compounding, and you'll avoid the mistakes of trying to pick winners when you don't have the skills. The second asset category is productive real estate. Notice that word productive. I'm not talking about speculation. I'm not talking about flipping houses or hoping prices go up. I'm talking about property that generates income, that serves a function, that throws off cash flow regardless of what the market thinks it's worth. A rental property that produces monthly income is a productive asset. Commercial real estate leased to businesses is productive. Farmland that grows crops is productive. These assets share key characteristics. First, they generate cash flow that typically rises with inflation. Rents don't stay fixed when everything else gets more expensive. They adjust. Second, if you finance the purchase with a fixed-rate mortgage, you're paying back the loan with cheaper dollars as inflation erodes the real value of the debt. You borrowed valuable dollars and you're repaying with inflated dollars. That's a transfer of wealth from the lender to you. Third, the underlying asset often appreciates as construction costs, land scarcity, and replacement costs all rise with inflation. You're protected on multiple fronts. But, and this is crucial, real estate is not passive, it's work. You're dealing with tenants, maintenance, property taxes, insurance. If you buy the wrong property in the wrong location at the wrong price, you'll discover that real estate can destroy wealth just as easily as create it. This is where circle of competence matters again. If you understand a local market, if you know how to evaluate properties, if you can manage tenants or hire competent management, then real estate can be excellent. If you're buying because some seminar promoter told you it's the path to wealth, you're about to learn an expensive lesson. Warren and I have owned substantial real estate through Berkshire. But we've always thought of it as productive assets, buildings that house our businesses, property that serves an operational purpose. We've never bought real estate purely as speculation, hoping some greater fool will pay more than we did. Here's a test I use. If the property stopped appreciating tomorrow, if it never went up in value again, would you still want to own it based purely on the income it generates? If the answer is yes, you're investing. If the answer is no, you're speculating. Speculation isn't investing. It's gambling with extra steps. The third asset, and this surprises people, is yourself. Your skills, your knowledge, your earning power. This is the most underinvested asset in most people's portfolios. Let me explain the mathematics. Your human capital, your ability to generate income, is probably your largest asset. If you're 30 years old earning $60,000 a year, and you work for 35 more years, that's over $2 million in lifetime earnings. That's before considering raises, promotions, or career changes. Now, what happens if you invest in yourself and increase your earning power by 20%? You've just created $400,000 of additional lifetime earnings. Show me another investment that can return $400,000 on a $10,000 investment in education or training. You can't, because it doesn't exist. The return on investing in yourself, when done intelligently, dwarfs every other investment category. But people don't think this way. They'll scrimp and save to build a cash cushion while their skills become obsolete. They'll skip the course that could transform their career because it costs a few $1,000s. Meanwhile, that cash cushion is losing 3% per year to inflation, and their stagnant career is costing them tens of thousands in foregone earnings. That's not financial prudence. That's expensive short-sightedness. Now, I'm not saying spend recklessly on any education that's marketed to you. The education industry is full of charlatans selling worthless credentials. You need to be brutally honest about what skills actually create value in the marketplace. Learn skills that are in demand. Skills that are difficult to replicate. Skills that allow you to solve valuable problems for others. Technical skills, communication skills, leadership skills, skills that compound over time. I spent my entire life learning across multiple disciplines, not because I wanted to impress people at cocktail parties, but because complex problems require tools from multiple toolboxes. You can't understand business without understanding psychology. You can't understand investing without understanding mathematics. You can't understand anything without being able to think clearly and communicate effectively. The beautiful thing about investing in yourself is that the returns can't be taken away. The market can crash. Real estate can collapse. But skills stay with you. Knowledge stays with you. The ability to create value stays with you. This is true safety, not nominal stability, but genuine resilience. Here's what I tell young people. If you have $20,000 and you're early in your career, you might be making a terrible mistake keeping it all in a savings account. That money could fund education that doubles your income. It could fund starting a business. It could give you the runway to take a lower-paying job that teaches you valuable skills. The opportunity cost of playing it safe with cash might be the best decade of your career. But again, circle of competence. Invest in skills you can actually develop. Skills that match your abilities and interests. Skills that have market demand. Don't go into debt for a degree in something unmarketable. Don't spend money learning skills that AI will obsolete in 5 years. Be rational about what actually creates value. The fourth asset category is businesses you control. Not just ownership in public companies, but businesses you actually operate. This is different from passive stock ownership. This is active entrepreneurship. Here's why this matters. When you own a business you control, you're not just hoping management does a good job. You are management. You make the decisions. You capture all the upside. And in an inflationary environment, you can adjust prices, change suppliers, modify the business model. You have agency. A well-run small business can generate returns that make stock market returns look pedestrian. I've seen people build businesses that throw off 50, 70, even 100% returns on invested capital. That's real wealth creation at a speed passive investments can't match. But, and this is a massive qualifier, most businesses fail. Most entrepreneurs lose money. Most people who think they're good at business are wrong. This is the highest risk, highest reward category on this list. You need real skills, real knowledge, real discipline. If you're not willing to work harder than you've ever worked, learn faster than you've ever learned, and accept that you might fail, then business ownership isn't for you. Keep your money in index funds and develop your career. That's the rational choice for most people. But if you're in your circle of competence, if you've identified a real market need, if you have the skills to execute, then building a business might be the best investment you ever make. Warren and I have done this repeatedly through Berkshire. We've bought businesses, improved them, and held them. The returns have been extraordinary, not because we're geniuses, but because we bought good businesses run by good people at sensible prices, then let them operate. The key is knowing what you're doing. The difference between successful entrepreneurship and expensive failure is often just knowledge and execution. Don't start a business because you're bored with your job. Start a business because you've identified a real opportunity that matches your skills. The fifth asset category is precious metals and hard assets, but not the way most people think about them. Gold is what people rush to when they're scared. They think it's safe. They think it's a hedge against inflation. They're partially right and mostly wrong. Here's the problem with gold. It doesn't do anything. It sits there. It doesn't produce earnings. It doesn't generate cash flow. It doesn't adapt to inflation. You buy it hoping someone will pay you more for it later. That's not investing. That's speculation based on fear. Warren has joked that we could take all the gold ever mined, melt it into a giant cube, and what would we have? A cube that does nothing except require security. Meanwhile, with the same money, we could buy farmland that produces crops or businesses that generate billions in earnings. Which sounds more productive? But here's where hard assets make sense. Productive hard assets. A farm that grows food. Machinery that enables production. Tools that allow you to build things. These are assets that have inherent utility, that serve a function that would still matter even if the financial system collapsed. The principle is simple. Own things that do something, not things that just sit there looking pretty. A tractor on a farm is a hard asset. It enables production. Gold in a vault is just expensive jewelry with no function. Now, I'm not saying to never own gold. If you want to keep 5 or 10% of your portfolio in gold as insurance against true catastrophe, fine. But don't confuse insurance with investment. Insurance costs money. It's supposed to. You're paying for protection, not returns. The real opportunity in hard assets is finding undervalued productive capacity. Buying equipment when industries are in distress. Buying land when farmers are struggling. Finding assets that can produce value but are temporarily cheap. This requires knowledge, timing, and discipline. It's not for everyone, but when done right, it can generate excellent returns while providing real inflation protection. The common thread across all 5 asset categories is this. They're productive. They do something. Businesses produce goods and services. Real estate houses people. Your skills enable you to create value. The businesses you control generate earnings. Hard assets enable production. They're active, not passive. They adapt, they compound, they grow. Cash does none of these things. Cash is inert. It's a placeholder, a medium of exchange, a temporary store of value. It's not an investment. It's not even a good store of value over time. It's a necessary evil that serves specific purposes but should never be your primary asset. Now let me address the psychology, because understanding the logic and actually implementing it are 2 different challenges. Why do smart people keep too much cash? First, there's the availability bias. Market crashes are vivid and memorable. You remember 2008. You remember the dot-com crash. You remember watching your neighbor panic as their portfolio dropped 40%. That's scary. It sticks in your mind. Inflation is invisible. You don't see prices rising 3% per year. You don't feel your purchasing power eroding. It happens slowly, quietly, painlessly, until one day you realize you can't retire because your savings, which looked adequate 15 years ago, now buy half what they used to. The vivid fear of market crashes overwhelms the invisible fear of inflation. So you make the irrational choice. You avoid the visible risk and accept the invisible one. Second, there's social proof. Everyone keeps cash. Your parents told you to save money in the bank. Your friends have savings accounts. It feels responsible, adult, sensible, but social proof is a terrible guide for financial decisions. Just because everyone does something doesn't make it right. In every financial bubble, social proof drives people to do stupid things together. In every market crash, social proof drives people to sell at the bottom together. Following the crowd is how you get average results at best, catastrophic results at worst. Third, there's loss aversion. We hate losing what we have more than we enjoy gaining something new. The pain of a 20% portfolio decline feels much worse than the pleasure of a 20% gain. So we structure our finances to avoid painful losses, even if it means accepting certain losses to inflation. This is predictable human psychology. You can't eliminate it. But you can understand it, name it when you see it, and build systems that protect you from your own irrationality. Here's my system, and you can adapt it to your situation. First, I decided long ago what percentage should be in different asset categories based on rational analysis, not emotion. Then I stick to it. I rebalance when things drift. But I don't change the plan based on fear or greed or market predictions. Second, I don't check prices daily. I don't torture myself with volatility. I know the businesses I own are productive. I know they'll compound over time. Daily price movements are noise. Long-term value creation is signal. I focus on signal. Third, I maintain enough cash for true emergencies and opportunities. Not 5 years of expenses. Not 2 years. 3 to 6 months. That's it. Everything else is in productive assets. This isn't complicated. It's boring, actually. But boring and rational beats exciting and emotional over any meaningful time frame. Now let me give you a framework for thinking about your own situation, because I can't give you a specific prescription. I don't know your circumstances, your knowledge, your temperament, but I can give you the questions to ask yourself. First question. What is my circle of competence? What do I actually understand? If you understand businesses and can read financial statements, maybe you hold mostly stocks. If you understand real estate and local markets, maybe that's your focus. If you understand neither, maybe you hold low-cost index funds and focus on developing your career. Honesty here is crucial. Most people overestimate their competence. Better to admit ignorance and invest simply than to pretend expertise and invest poorly. Second question, what is my true risk? Not the volatility I see on a screen, but the probability I won't have enough purchasing power to live the life I want. For most people under 50, the true risk is inflation destroying their savings over decades, not a temporary market decline. Third question, what is my time horizon? If you need money in 6 months, keep it in cash. You have no choice. But if you don't need it for 20 years, why would you choose an asset guaranteed to lose value over that period? Fourth question, what are the second-order consequences? Most people stop thinking after the first level. Cash feels safe. Stop thinking. But second-order thinking asks, what happens next? Safe cash leads to inadequate retirement savings. Inadequate savings leads to working longer than you want. Working longer reduces quality of life. The second-order consequences of safe cash are often terrible. Fifth question, what does inversion tell me? Inversion is one of the most powerful thinking tools I know. Instead of asking what should I do, ask what would guarantee failure. If you hold mostly cash for 30 years, what's the guaranteed outcome? You'll lose significant purchasing power. You'll reach retirement with inadequate resources. You'll have been safe in the short term and poor in the long term. If you can't accept that outcome, you need to change behavior today. These aren't rhetorical questions. Get a piece of paper. Write down your answers. You'll be shocked how much clarity comes from actually thinking through your situation instead of just reacting emotionally. Most people never do this. They make financial decisions the way they choose what to eat for lunch, based on what feels good in the moment. That's fine for lunch. It's catastrophic for your financial future. Here's something else that needs to be said, even though it's uncomfortable. The financial industry often gives you terrible advice because their incentives don't align with yours. They make money from activity, from fees, from complex products. They don't make money from you buying index funds and holding them for 30 years. So they sell you on active management. They tell you the market is too complex for individuals. They imply that you need their expertise, their proprietary strategies, their sophisticated approaches. It's mostly nonsense. Profitable nonsense for them, expensive nonsense for you. The data is clear. After fees, most active managers underperform simple index funds over time. Not some, most. But they keep collecting fees because people believe that expensive must be better, that complex must be sophisticated, that active must be superior to passive. Wrong on all counts. I'm not saying all financial advisors are bad. Some are excellent. But you need to understand their incentives. Are they paid commissions on products they sell? Red flag. Are they paid a percentage of assets under management? Better, but still creates incentive for unnecessary activity. Are they paid by the hour for advice? Best alignment with your interests. The incentive structure tells you everything you need to know about whose interests are being served. Here's the best financial advice you'll ever get, and it's free. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference in productive assets you understand. Be patient. Don't do stupid things. That's it. Everything else is implementation details and optimization around those core principles. But people don't want to hear this. They want a secret. They want complexity. They want to believe there's some sophisticated strategy that will make them rich without discipline or patience. There isn't. I'm sorry, but there just isn't. The secret, which isn't secret at all, is that time plus rationality beats cleverness plus activity. The person who buys great businesses at fair prices and holds them for 40 years will beat the person who trades frequently, chases trends, and pays fees to active managers. Not sometimes. Always. History proves this conclusively. Let me give you a concrete example from our own experience. In 1988, Berkshire bought Coca-Cola stock. People thought we were crazy. It wasn't a hot tech stock. It wasn't exciting. It was a boring beverage company. We paid just over $1 billion. Today, that investment throws off more than $600 million in annual dividends. That's just the dividends. The stock is worth tens of billions. We didn't trade it. We didn't try to time the market. We didn't sell when people said it was overvalued. We just held ownership in a great business and let compounding do its work. That's the entire strategy. Buy great businesses at sensible prices and hold them. It's so simple that people think there must be more to it. There isn't. The complexity is in identifying great businesses and sensible prices. The execution is simple. Buy and hold. Now let me address the question everyone's thinking. What about market crashes? What if I invest everything and the market drops 40% next year? Fair question. Here's the answer. First, if you invest and the market immediately crashes, yes, that's painful. But if you hold for 10 years, the market has never failed to recover. Not sometimes. Never. Every single time. Over every 10-year period, stocks have positive returns. Second, you don't have to invest everything at once. Dollar cost averaging, investing a fixed amount regularly over time, eliminates the timing problem. Sometimes you buy high, sometimes low. It averages out. Third, the alternative to investing is guaranteed loss to inflation. You're so worried about a potential 40% crash that might recover that you're accepting a certain 30% loss over a decade. That's not rational. That's fear making you poorer. Fourth, crashes are opportunities, not disasters. If you have cash reserves and the market drops 40%, you get to buy great businesses at sale prices. That's when fortunes are made, not lost. The people who lose in crashes are the ones who panic and sell. The people who win are the ones who stay calm and buy. Your temperament matters more than your intelligence. A smart person who panics is more dangerous than a dumb person who stays calm. Here's a principle I've lived by. When you can't predict outcomes, focus on process. You can't control whether the market goes up or down next year. But you can control whether you're acting rationally, whether you're diversified, whether you're in your circle of competence, whether you're patient. Good process consistently applied leads to good outcomes over time. Bad process occasionally gets lucky, but usually leads to disaster. The drunk driver sometimes makes it home. That doesn't validate drunk driving. Now let me talk about asset allocation, because this is where theory meets reality. How much should be in each category? I can't give you a universal answer because the right allocation depends on your age, your income, your knowledge, your goals, your temperament. But I can give you principles. If you're young, with decades until retirement, you should be heavily in productive assets. Stocks, real estate, your own skills, businesses. The time horizon allows you to weather volatility. The compounding period turns modest returns into substantial wealth. Cash should be minimal, just emergency reserves. If you're near retirement, you need more stability. Not because stocks are suddenly dangerous, but because you have less time to recover from downturns. Maybe you shift some assets to bonds or dividend-paying stocks. But even in retirement, you need growth. You might live another 30 years. Inflation will still erode purchasing power. All cash is still a mistake. If you're somewhere in the middle, you need balance. Enough productive assets for growth. Enough stability to sleep well. Enough liquidity for opportunities and emergencies. The specific numbers matter less than the thinking behind them. Here's what I see most people doing wrong. They keep way too much in cash because it feels safe. They have 2 years of expenses in savings accounts. They have money market funds as their largest holding. They're losing 3 to 4% per year in purchasing power, guaranteed, because they're afraid of a potential loss that might never happen or might quickly recover. That's not safety. That's slow motion poverty. The right amount of cash is 3 to 6 months of expenses. That's your emergency fund. That's your sleep well at night money. Everything else should be working for you in productive assets, not speculative assets, not complex derivatives, not cryptocurrency. Productive assets, businesses, real estate, skills, simple, boring, effective. Here's another mistake. People treat retirement accounts and taxable accounts the same way. They shouldn't. In tax-advantaged accounts like 401(k)s and IRAs, you should be aggressive. These are long-term holds. Maximize growth. In taxable accounts, you need to consider tax efficiency. Maybe you hold tax-efficient index funds. Maybe you focus on stocks you'll hold long-term to get favorable capital gains treatment. Maybe you use tax loss harvesting. The tax code is part of the game. Learn the rules, play within them, optimize legally. But don't let taxes drive bad investment decisions. I've seen people refuse to sell profitable positions because they owe taxes. So they hold overvalued assets, watching them decline to avoid a tax bill. That's stupid. Pay the tax. Move to better opportunities. The tax is just a cost of making money. If you're paying taxes, you're making money. That's a good problem to have. Now let me address something that makes people uncomfortable. Most of you reading this are doing it wrong. You have too much cash. You're underinvested in productive assets. You're letting fear and inertia cost you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in foregone returns. That's not a judgment. That's an observation based on decades of watching human behavior. People know what they should do, they just don't do it. Why? Because knowing and doing are separated by psychology. Knowing is intellectual, doing is emotional, and emotions usually win. The solution isn't to become an emotionless robot. The solution is to build systems that make the right behavior automatic. Set up automatic transfers from your paycheck to investment accounts. Set up automatic investment in index funds. Remove the emotional decision-making. Make rationality the default. Once it's automatic, you can't sabotage yourself. You can't panic and stop investing. You can't get greedy and chase hot stocks. You can't let inertia keep money in cash. The system does the work. This is how you beat your own psychology, not through willpower, but through systems. Now, let me give you the uncomfortable truth about time. Every day you keep significant money in cash, you're losing. Every day inflation erodes value. Every day you're missing compounding returns. Every day is a day you can't get back. A 30-year-old with $50,000 in cash, losing 3% per year to inflation for 10 years, will watch that become worth about $37,000 in real purchasing power. If that same person invested in an S&P 500 index fund returning 10%, it would grow to about $130,000. The difference is $93,000. That's the cost of a decade of playing it safe. And you can't recover it. Time moves in one direction. Compounding only works if you give it time to work. Starting late means you need much higher returns or much higher contributions to reach the same end point. Most people can't achieve that, so they just retire poor, wondering what happened. What happened was they kept their money in cash. They played it safe. They avoided volatility. They guaranteed poverty. Let me give you one more mental model: opportunity cost. Every dollar in cash earning 0.5% is a dollar not earning 8 or 10% in productive assets. That difference, compounded over decades, represents massive foregone wealth. If you keep $100,000 in cash for 30 years at 0.5%, you'll have about $116,000 nominally. Adjusted for 3% inflation, that's worth about $48,000 in today's purchasing power. You've lost more than half your real wealth. If you'd invested that $100,000 in an S&P 500 index fund averaging 10%, you'd have about $1.7 million. After inflation, that's about $700,000 in real purchasing power. The difference between cash and investing is the difference between poverty and comfort. This isn't speculation. This is what historical data shows. And yet people still make the same mistake because fear is more powerful than mathematics. This is what I mean by avoiding stupid mistakes. You don't need to be brilliant to understand that losing half your purchasing power is worse than accepting temporary volatility. You just need to look at the actual numbers instead of making decisions based on feelings. Here's what I want you to do after reading this. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. First, calculate how much money you have in cash and cash equivalents, checking, savings, money market. Add it up. Second, calculate your monthly expenses. Multiply by 6. That's your emergency fund target. Whatever's left is excess cash that should be invested. Fourth, if you don't have investment accounts, open them today. Brokerage account. Retirement accounts if eligible. This takes an hour. Fifth, move the excess cash into productive assets. If you understand individual stocks, buy great businesses at fair prices. If you don't, buy a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. Don't overthink it. Don't wait for the perfect time. Just move the money. Sixth, set up automatic monthly investments from your paycheck. Make it systematic. Remove emotion from the process. That's it. 6 steps. You can do all of this today. And if you do, you'll have taken control of your financial future in a way most people never do. Now, I know some of you won't do this. You'll read it, nod along, agree intellectually, and then do nothing. You'll tell yourself you'll do it later. You'll wait for the right time. You'll keep accumulating cash because it feels safe, and in 30 years, you'll wish you'd acted today. That's the tragedy I've watched for 8 decades. People knowing what to do but not doing it, then wondering why they didn't get the results they wanted. The results come from action, not knowledge. Knowledge is the starting point. Action is what matters. Let me close with this. The title of this discussion is about 5 assets safer than cash. But the deeper lesson is about rationality versus emotion, about long-term thinking versus short-term comfort, about mathematics versus feelings. Cash serves a purpose. It's necessary for transactions. It's appropriate for emergency reserves. It's useful for near-term needs. But treating cash as your primary asset, your safe harbor, your foundation is a mistake, a predictable, expensive mistake that compounds negatively over time. The 5 asset categories I've described, productive businesses, real estate, yourself, controlled businesses, and productive hard assets, aren't magic. They're rational responses to a world where inflation exists and productivity compounds. They're choosing mathematics over emotion. Your job now is to think about your own situation, to be honest about your knowledge, your goals, your temperament, to calculate how much cash you actually need versus how much you're holding out of fear, to build a plan based on rationality, not comfort, to implement that plan systematically, to stick with it through volatility and uncertainty. That's how you win. Not by being brilliant, not by timing markets, not by finding secrets, by being consistently rational over long periods of time, by understanding that safety doesn't mean nominal stability. Safety means preserving and growing purchasing power. By acting on what you know instead of just knowing it. The wealthy don't keep their money in cash. They never have. They keep it in productive assets that compound over time. They accept volatility as the price of real returns. They think in decades, not days. You can do the same. The knowledge is here. The tools are available. The mathematics are clear. The only question is whether you'll act. Most won't. But maybe you're different. Maybe you're one of the few who will read this, understand it, and actually change behavior. I hope you are. Because financial security is within reach for anyone willing to be rational and patient. The path is clear. The obstacles are mostly psychological. And psychology can be managed with awareness and systems. Now stop reading and start doing. Calculate your excess cash. Open investment accounts. Move money into productive assets. Set up automatic systems. Do it today. Because every day you wait is a day of returns you'll never get back. That's not meant to scare you. That's just mathematics. And mathematics, unlike emotion, never lies.